Look at that stud of a rainbow. Wow. What a beautiful fish. Incredible. He's heavy. He's super heavy. Wow. Very nice.
Howdy guys, Cal Kellogg here. I got a question from a guy down in Folsom, California, Josh B. And I get this question from a lot of people. Josh told me he's planning to get a kayak, but right now it's just not in the cards, and he is fishing off the bank, and he wants to get into trout fishing, and he wants to know what kind of basic gear does he need just to get started. And I started off bank fishing. I bank fished for many years, and let me assure you, you can catch some very large trout off the bank, and you can catch big numbers of trout off the bank. And a lot of guys never transition to any kind of watercraft. They just stay on the bank, they catch plenty of fish, and they are very happy with that decision. Bank fishing tackle is very simple. It's simple whether you're a beginner or whether you've been at it for 25, 30 years or more like me. Very simple way to go. There's just some basic stuff that you need to get started, and then you'll just start building a knowledge base, and that's going to allow you to kind of perfect your approach, perfect the gear that you use. Cornerstone of bank fishing for trout is the rod and reel. There's a broad range of rods and reels that will work. What you want, this is a very inexpensive Daiwa rod here. I offer some great tackle over in my store at fishhuntshoot.com. You just want a light spinning rod. This one is rated for 2 to 6 pound line. It could be rated for 4 to 10 pound line, 6 to 12. You want a rod that has, this one's rigged up with a slip bobber, but you want a rod that has some play in the tip, like that, to cushion the fight of the trout, and so you can kind of see the bites and stuff like that. And when you set the hook, you won't snap the line because the rod's too stiff. So you want a little bit of play in that tip, but you also want some backbone in case you hook a really big fish, or if you get snagged and you're kind of trying to work it loose. You need a little bit of power in the midsection of the rod. I see a lot of rods that are called trout spinning rods, but they're way too soft. You don't want that rod that's bending all the way to the handle when you hook a 14-inch trout. You got no power there. You got no power to steer the fish around. Sometimes when you're bank fishing, you have to slide the fish right up on the bank to land them if you're keeping fish. And you need a little bit of backbone to get that done. Now let's look at the reel. You just need a basic spinning reel. A medium to low priced reel works fine. If you're going to spool up with monofilament, you want to go with 6 or 8 pound test. You can go lighter, but 6 and 8 pound test gives you a little margin for error. It gives you a little extra power for big fish. A lot of guys go with 4 and stuff like that. I think that's too light, but that's their gig. But I would advise you to start out with 6 or 8 pound monofilament. If you decide to go with braid, like I have on this reel right here, I am using 10 pound braid. You can use 10 to 15 pound braid. Braid is very thin in diameter. You'll have to change your line less often because braid just has kind of a longer life on the reel. So whether you go with the mono or the braid, that's up to you. Just go with some fairly light line, a decent quality reel with a smooth drag. Something that holds 150, 175 yards of line is awesome. If you catch a big trout, he may tear off quite a bit of line, so it's good to have a little bit of cushion there, but most of the trout you catch are going to be pan size, so line capacity isn't a huge issue, but it's always good to plan to catch big fish. You never know. You know, you're going out thinking about pan sized trout and you might find yourself hooked up to a 12-pound trout, and you always want to put yourself in a position to land those fish. Enough said about tackle. Let's talk about bait and the gear you use on the end of your rod. And I'm going to put a link down below here where I get into how to rig up, you know, in much more detail. But let's just take a look at the basics right now. First and foremost, you need something to carry your gear in. Now, if I'm just out exclusively bank fishing, I just like to use a light backpack. You know, I can put all my gear in there, plus some snacks, some water, my camera, you know, whatever I might need. It's really easy to carry if I'm out hiking around. This is just a little soft lunch cooler that I got at Target. I've been doing some bank fishing out of my kayak. I'll beach the kayak, hop out with Lucy, make some coffee, toss out a rod, maybe spend an hour there playing with the dog and see if I can catch some fish. So this stows real easily on the kayak. But you know, a little bag like this, I could put everything I need for a session of bank fishing for trout in this bag and have all the different situations covered. So let me show you what I keep in this bag. I know I keep turning around on the camera here. I got a little railing here where I got all my stuff setting. You need some night crawlers. I used to use a lot of mini crawlers. I go for the full-size night crawlers now. If I want a smaller worm, I can break off a section. I usually like to use about a 2-inch section of worm. We'll talk a little bit more about worms in just a second. Let me put these over here. So you need your night crawlers, and you need a little selection of power bait. This yellow, this kind of cornmeal colored stuff here, this has always been one of my favorites. The chartreuse is great, and of course, you can't really go trout fishing with power bait if you don't have the dread rainbow power bait. So you can kind of, if you find out they want green, you can kind of dig out some green or some orange. You can go with the multicolored ball, whatever. So remember, when you're putting this stuff on your hook, you're going to be using a fairly small hook. I like to use a ball that is about a 1/4 inch around. I don't use a big old glob. You'll see guys using a big old glob. This stuff's fairly expensive, and a little ball, just so long as you got enough of it to float your leader up off the bottom, you're good to go. So keep your balls small, just cover the hook, and cast it out there. This stuff was made by aliens, man. Berkeley won't tell anyone what's in it, but it is trout catching dynamite, particularly planted trout. So worms and power bait, those are your two basic baits. Now you're going to want to throw a few slip bobbers into your pack. Won't use these every time, but sometimes when the trout are up near the surface, you can do very well, you know, drifting a worm or a small ball of power bait, you know, 4 or 5 feet under the surface. It works pretty well when the trout are up, and it's a lot of fun when you see that bobber go under. I'd say 90% of the time, you're going to be fishing your bait off the bottom using a Carolina type sliding sinker rig. And that brings us to terminal gear. Right here, this is all my terminal gear. It's a very small box. All I have in here is some bullet weights, some beads, some snaps and swivels, and a couple different types of hooks. And that's about it. I might have a few split shot in there. Let's take a look. So, kind of hold it up here. See here, I've got bullet weights. You can use egg sinkers, but I find that they snag more than bullet weights. So I like to go with the bullet weights. I've got a variety of different size hooks in there, different styles of hooks. I use 2 basic styles of hook though. Let me grab one of these little guys here. They're most elusive. I use small octopus hooks, just like that, for fishing power bait. Caught a lot of trout with these hooks using worms, but if I know I'm fishing power bait, I like to go with the octopus. If I'm going, you know, exclusively with worms, I like to use a hook like this, a little tiny bait holder hook. I use small hooks. When you're bait fishing for trout off the bank, the plan is to have the trout swallow the bait, you reel the trout in, put him in the frying pan. If you catch a trout that way that you want to let go, clip the leader right at his mouth and get him back in the water. Don't do any kind of surgery and try to get the hook out and release the fish. He's gonna die. Most of the fish we catch off the bank, we catch them, we keep them, we fry them up in a pan, and they are yummy good. So that's why you can get away with a really tiny hook. You're hooking them down here in the throat, and you're not going to lose many fish. The only fish you're going to lose pretty much are the ones that get snagged in the rocks, something like that. If you let them have the bait for a few seconds, you're going to get a good purchase on that hook, and they aren't going anywhere. So that's really about it. I have some beads to kind of put between my sinker and my swivel. And like I said a second ago, I'm going to put a link up here, or maybe 2 links up here, where you can check out some of my more in-depth bank fishing videos to really get an in-depth view of how you rig up that Carolina rig, how you put the bait on, how you put your rod in the rocks, and so on and so forth, all that kind of stuff. But this is just the basics. Final 2 pieces of gear. Let's see. Actually, 3 things. Final 3 things. This is bad TV when you're turning your back on the camera. The final 3 things you need. You need a little spool of fluorocarbon leader material. In this case, this is 8-pound Vanish. Fluorocarbon reflects light at the same rate as water does, so it's virtually invisible to the trout, and sometimes that's really important. So always use a fluorocarbon leader. You always want a worm blower, because to get a worm to float up off the bottom like power bait, you put a little puff of air in him. And if you're not familiar with worm blower, it just looks like a little bottle like that. You take off this cap, and you'll see there's a little hypodermic style needle in there. Put your worm on the hook, put the needle in the worm, give him a little puff of air, pull that out. He'll have enough air in him to float him and the leader up off the bottom, where the trout are more likely to see your bait. And finally, since they are swallowing these baits, the fish that you want to keep, you're going to want a decent set of forceps to reach in there and get that hook back. And I like to kind of with the curved tip. You can find these at a lot of different places. A lot of tackle stores have them. You can find them at, the county fair when you're there. There's always those guys there that have a whole bunch of different kinds of tools. Grab a couple pairs of these. They're just handy dandy to have, and you can get down in there and get that hook back and bait it up, get back in the water. That's about it, Josh. I like to wear comfortable shoes. If I cast in at a spot and I don't get a bite within 30 minutes, I like to, throw my gear back in the pack and get going. Some guys like to carry chairs. Some guys like to carry rod holders. Some guys like to mix in some lures. That's a little more advanced, than the basics. You'll probably want to get into tossing some lures too. But start out with the gear I've just described. Start building some experience out on the water. You should start catching fish right away. And every fish that you catch and every outing you go on should make you a better fisherman. Just start observing what's going on. Start seeing, where the fish are and where the fish aren't. What are the fish doing throughout the day? What's making you successful? What's making you unsuccessful? And you're just going to get to be better and better. That knowledge is going to be valuable if and when you do transition to a boat or a kayak or some other kind of watercraft. But a lot of guys, like I said, they stay on the bank. They're very happy there. They catch a lot of fish. For the next month, all the bank guys out there, you're going to have great fishing in the foothills at places like Pardee, Collins, Comanche, all those places and more through the end of April and into May. But at that point, we're going to start getting snow and ice melt up in the Sierras, and you guys can kind of start climbing up into the high country, climbing up into the Sierras, and it'll be spring all over again up there at places like French Meadows and Davis and Frenchman's Lake and all that. And if you're a bank fisherman that likes to target trout or is planning to target trout, you have a lot of great fishing ahead of you. Just follow that snow line right on up the mountain, and you will be catching fish well into the summertime and beyond. That's about all I got to say on this subject. I'm Kel Kellogg. I'm signing off for now. If you're looking for trout gear, including some great spinning rods and reels, go on over to fishhuntshoot.com. We will hook you up with what you need, and I will catch you next time right here on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. Stay safe out there on the water. Wear those life jackets, and I will see you soon. Thanks a lot, guys, for all the support.